Well, I'm excited. Tim and I are really excited to be here talking to you guys today. We were in the back reflecting on, what has gotten us to this point, and we're reflecting on the community. And I remember when I first started getting involved with DevOps, it was right around 2015 or so, and I remember going to DUZ, and it was in San Francisco at the time, so DevOps Enterprise Summit. And I was awed watching, you got Topal up there, and you got Gene Kim and stuff, and so all the talks about community, that has been, I feel like, been part of my journey here. So we're excited to share. So DX platform and product management, a perfect match. So a little bit about myself. So Ben Burbank, I'm currently the senior manager for the DX engineering at American Airlines. I've been at American Airlines for quite a while for an IT guy, 12 years. So everybody's like, why do you stay there? And I'm like, well, I got 4 boys, so they've treated my family well, but I've also had some really amazing opportunities. One of those opportunities that I had is, and I'll tell you a little bit about this later on, is I had the opportunity to, me and my team, establish the Dojo coaching at American Airlines, and that's been some of the best experiences I've had in my career. I'm passionate about improving the developer experience. I've always been passionate about making it to where engineers, if you're doing things that are repetitive, let's make it so you innovate better and let machines do what they do best. So I'm passionate about, essentially, I'm passionate about automating stuff and making engineers' lives easier. So I'll kick it over to Tim.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm Tim Haagenson, the product owner for developer experience at American Airlines. That primarily includes our system that we call Runway, which is an implementation of Backstage. You heard a little bit about Backstage earlier from James. I'm also responsible for all of the DevOps technical enablement tooling at American Airlines. So I'm a product owner, that's my title. By trade, I'm a software developer. I've got 15 years of experience in software development, although it's been about 4 years since that's actually been in my title. So I've been the product owner for a couple of years now, and then I did a couple of years of technical coaching before that. When it comes to my background, developer experience has been a very big thing. It all started about when I was 5, no, actually, about 10 years ago. When I was studying for my undergrad, I read an organizational behavior book that was going into motivators and demotivators and how they impact your people. Motivators are how you build culture, how happy people are at work, and demotivators are how you lose people, how they, why they leave, they're the primary purpose. So I kind of started a campaign then. I'm like, sometimes it sucks to be a software developer. Let's focus on those things and start removing them and just make it a better experience overall.
Excellent. So earlier today, well, before I jump into that, earlier today I heard someone talk about this is their first keynote speaker. This is my first keynote. So I'm getting my jitters out as well. I'm excited to be doing this. It took me a while to get the courage. We were talking about talking to different people, and so I was like, finally, after watching them, I can do this. We can do this. And so I did it, and then I invited Tim to join me, and so we're here, and we're excited to share our journey with you. So before we do, I want to talk a little bit about American Airlines to set the stage of what we're dealing with. So American Airlines is the world's largest airline by departure. So we fly roughly 500,000 passengers each day. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of schedules. You imagine, for those that have families and kids, when you have hey, one person got sick, or you got to go home and pick them up from school, and how that disruptive of all your schedules. So you can think about the schedule that we're trying to manage from that standpoint. We also operate 6,700 flights per day. Okay, so there's a lot of planes in and out, trying to make sure things run on time. And we offer flights to nearly 350 destinations in more than 50 countries. So there is a lot riding on IT, and there's a lot trying to make sure that, hey, we got to keep this running and keep it running smooth. Because when it doesn't work, it's quite awesome to watch, to say the least. So we wanted to share with you guys in IT what is our vision, is because it really speaks to this community of what DevOps. And so we at American Airlines, we envision and engineer unrivaled digital products. And we drive a more reliable and profitable airline. And I wanted to bring that up is because as part of IT, we see ourselves in building that unrivaled digital products that make a difference in the company's bottom line, which is a profitable airline as well as a reliable airline. All right, so Tim and I are going to talk to you about a few things today. It's going to, these 4 things, it's going to be grouped into these areas. The first area is we're going to take you back in a journey of American Airlines of where we were in about, we want to say about 2017, 2018 timeframe, and what we learned, and that's going to be around some of the things we learned about value stream mapping. Earlier today, we had a really good talk about lean principles. They're talking about what is DevOps, and they started leaning into that. We'll start picking up on some of those things there. Some of the things that we learned along the way, some of the core engineering principles that got us to where we are. And then Tim's going to jump in and talk to us about product management. What are the things that we're starting to bring to this engineering, to our product, and how we're building this, building our product from DX platform. And then the community we're looking to build, internal to AA, as well as continuing to extend it here with you all. All right, so before we get started, I want to talk to you a slide about where we are today and some of the results. And the reason this is important is because I want to captivate your guys' attention on saying, hey, let's look at what we have achieved and where we're at, so that way as we go through the journey, you'll know why and what we've been able to accomplish. So a couple points I wanted to make out. What you're looking at here, you saw a talk earlier today on Backstage. You're looking at American Airlines implementation of Backstage. We call it Runway. Affectionately called Runway. We've had jokes about that, about the runway walk and all that stuff. But so you're looking at our implementation of Backstage, and what you see there is we have been able to build in, as was displayed earlier, certified templates. Okay, these templates are everything from being able to build your GitHub repo, to actually building in your pipelines, to building in your Kubernetes instance, your networking, and everything you would need from end to end to have an application up and running to where you can start building on it. And that takes less than minutes, okay? Or it's minutes to be able to do that. So we've been able to get a lot of traction around that. That bottom screenshot there is what you're seeing is that you see that that's our unique visits, or not unique visits, excuse me, page visits per month. Tim was just about to correct me. So that's our page visits per month. Now, you're going to notice that's about 40,000 page visits each month. Okay? What that translates into is there's 3,000 unique visits each month. Now, our IT is about 3,000. So we have everybody in IT going to this portal at least once a month. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about as a success about what we've been able to get people to come to. Another amazing thing that we've been able to accomplish with this portal is pull requests based upon ephemeral environments based upon PRs. The benefit that we see in there is the age-old conversation around branching and environments and being how long-lived they are, and I got to keep it to deploy in this environment. We've been able to actually create an environment based upon a PR that can test your developer's code, and then once it's closed and merged in domain, it tears down that PR, and that environment is based upon your production instance of your configuration you'd have in Kubernetes. So we've been able to do some amazing things from that standpoint. Another shout out that I want to call that we've been able to successfully implement is that we have about 125 unique contributors to this platform, this core platform. So we're going to talk about InnerSource, and that's one of the things that we've been able to drive is and trying to grow that is we have 125 unique contributions there. And it's allowed us to extend automation to other engineers across the company where you have unique plugins. So now you know where we're at. Let's talk about how we got there. Okay, so I'm going to take you back, long back, okay? So I grew up in Idaho. These are called grain silos. I don't know if everybody knows what these are, but these are called grain silos. A little history about grain silos. So if you look at the top of the grain silos, there is one way out and one way into those grain silos. Everything, when you cut the grain, you load the trucks up there, they have conveyor belts. And those conveyor belts take the grain up to the top. You can see the connections at the top of those silos. And it dumps the grain in the top of those silos, okay? When it's time for you to get the grain out of those silos, they have a mechanism at the bottom of the silos to where it takes them out, puts them in a truck, and then they can take them to different spots. Why do I bring up grain silos? Who has here heard the term siloed IT? Okay? This is where it comes from. I'm going to talk to you about most enterprises Most large enterprises are probably going to fall in this scenario. I'm going to share with you about what American Airlines we were facing right around the year 2015, 2016, which led us into what we wanted to try and change. So imagine each one of those silos being a shared service team. So you got your database team, and you got your network team. You got your operations team. You got your security team. You got your access management team, and so forth. You got each of those teams. Now you as a developer, you're trying to create an environment to where you're trying to actually build and deploy something. So the way that these systems and these silos work the same way, the way that these systems would work is the only way that you could get work done is by requesting a ticket. So at the top, that's your ticket queue. So you put a ticket in the queue, and then you wait for your turn, waiting for your turn, and waiting for your turn. And eventually they would get to where you were up next and working on it. And you had to do that for every single silo across American Airlines, but in large enterprises, it's pretty common. So what you would end up with is in this scenario, you would end up when you're trying to create an application to get your repos, to get anything just to start working, you could end up with months and months and months of wait. So earlier when we talked about lean management and the principles of waste, there is a lot of waste in this system. In fact, it got so good that we American Airlines perfected it to where I was hired as a technical account manager. I was basically a project manager that I interfaced with all of those silos to be able to build an application for the application teams. So we created middlemen just to make that easier. So my passion in making this easier has always been born at American Airlines. And that's where we found ourselves. This is in about 2016. Along with these environments, we had architecture decisions. We had a central cab board that was making decisions that was furthest removed from where the developers were working. So they would make a decision over here, thou must do this. And developers are like, okay, I must do this. Not to take into consideration how much extra work it would take for them to implement that solution. So we had that. On top of that, we had mandatory deployment environments. Thou shalt deploy to your QA environment. Thou shalt deploy to your test environment. Thou shalt deploy to your performance environment. And don't forget your stage environment just to make sure that everything's working before you get to production. So this was the environment we found ourselves in. I don't know if any of you guys resonate with that or if that sounds familiar, but we're like, there's got to be a better way. Okay? So with this, there was teams there was pockets of goodness. And I'm going to kick it over to Tim, and he's going to talk to you about those pockets of goodness.
All right, thank you, Ben. Yeah, so it's 2017, late 2017. We're recognizing that this is a problem. Like a few of our executives have attended DevOps Enterprise Summit. They're like, hey, there's a better way. I've heard all about it. These folks at Pivotal, they know what they're doing. They said they're doing delivery transformation. We're going to do it. Let's try it out. So I was part of a team. Late 2017, they pulled me off of what I was working on. They're like, we're going to take these other 2 people, maybe 3 people. Y'all are going to get together. You can break all of the rules. You're going to do delivery transformation. You got 6 weeks. We've got a project that is incredibly important. We need to go to market in 6 weeks, break all the rules. So it's like, okay, great. This sounds amazing. So very first, I'm like, okay, I need infrastructure that I can deploy on. I need to get that done right away. I go over to the group and I say, okay, give me some infrastructure. Like, I'm ready. Like, we've got a small little prototype we want to throw out there. Let's try it. And they're like, have you been to CAB yet? Well, no, I'm breaking the rules. I'm allowed to break the rules. No, not that rule. Not that rule. That's the wrong rule. I'm like, okay. I'll go to CAB. I go over to CAB. I'm like, all right, I need infrastructure. They said, I got to talk to you. What do you do? And they're like, oh okay. Like, where's your architecture diagram? Where's all your documentation? I was like, well, I've got like some code written. I can show you that. I can give you some network diagrams of like how we figured it out. They're like, no. You've got to go to the review board with the architecture group so they can look at it and tell you what you can do. So we come over here. It's like, okay, great. I'm ready. And I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and get started. We've got some code. We're ready to deploy it and try it. And they're like, you wrote that in Node. That's not approved here. You need to rewrite that in Spring Boot. It's like, oh no. Okay, so that takes us through the end of 2019. And like we're struggling, we're trying to get things done. We're like arguing back and forth with leadership, trying to get things out. we've built parts of this application that they want us to build, but not the whole thing, because we were trying to like just get one thing that we could prototype and get to market. And then, I want to say April, May, I forget which month, the book Accelerate came out. My team had already been looking at DORA metrics, and the book Accelerate came out. I bought the book, I read it over a weekend, I bought 10 more copies, gave it to my team, had them read it. They read it over the next week, and then we went to our leadership, and they're like, okay, look, Jez right here says that I can do this. So we had like a small pocket where like they started listening to us, and like we started to try some things. And we were able to get deployed to production like pretty quickly after that. We had a very small prototype, involved emailing customers and asking them to call us, and then we were gonna sit with the people who were at that specialized phone number and see what happened. And it was great. The product went to market, we made money, we figured out that it worked, and then it took us another 2 years after that to build the whole system, but we were actually able to do it, and we're like, hey, this is great. And then like the leaders started piling in, they're like, I can't believe you guys have done this, this is amazing, we have to bring this to all of American Airlines. How do we do it? And honestly, I look at them and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we read a couple of books, we broke a few rules. Like, I don't know, like how can we possibly do this? Like, how can we take what 10 people have learned here? And there were a few other pockets within the AA.com space that were also trying the same thing. We ended up with maybe 30, 40 people that like had arrived, as I would say it, where we were deploying to production every single day, 20 to 30 deployments a week, things like that. And they're like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I just don't know. Thankfully, Ben had been retasked.
Yeah, so at this point, I was working in the loyalty operations area. And I was, at that point, I was in that space as a DevOps advocate. American Airlines had just started creating what we call the leadership group of DevOps advocacies. We had been doing agile transformation as what Tim had talked about, is trying to get through some different agile methodologies for the past 5 years. And we're like, you know what? We can take that goodness, we can take the goodness that Tim's team was experiencing here, and we can do a DevOps transformation and bring that to the masses. So as we started looking at that, that's about the time when I think DevOps started before then, but it started hitting the masses pretty big then. We started hitting some, we went to DUZ. It's about, we went to DUZ and started looking at that, looking and meeting with people there. Some core elements of our DevOps transformation was American Airlines implementation of the Dojo. Dojo, for those that don't know, is an immersive learning coaching, okay? It's where you go and you learn. It basically means the place of the way. And so you would go there, teams would go there, and you'd have coaches that would go and teach you how to do what Tim's team was doing. And we were trying to do that and teach other people and teach other leaders on how to do that. So we're like, hey, look, I think we can do this. And so we brought in, before we started the hangar, when you talk about community, I first met Roger when he was at Verizon with Ross. So we went and we visited Verizon. Said, hey, what are you guys doing here? You got a dojo, how is that successful? And so we talked to them. We also went to Target. There was a story earlier about Target. I think every good DevOps journey starts at Target. It feels like that they've been the front and the poster child of all of that. It's been a lot of goodnesses that come from that. So we went and visited with the leaderships at Target, said, hey, tell us what you're doing. Talk to us, share with us. And so we started building that community with them. And that was my first introductions into the dojo community. So we started what we call our hangar, affectionately called the hangar. And so it's dojo coaching. Now what we did during this time frame when we stood up this hangar, oh, and by the way, for those that are looking to start up a dojo, you don't need a fancy room like this. You don't need a fancy building. Our first dojo was in a throwaway conference room that no one wanted to use. And we used it there for 6 weeks to prove it out. After that, they kicked us out. We went to a school in downtown Dallas that we were partnering with, and they said, hey, no one's using this choir room. And we ran for months our dojo there. So you don't need a perfect spot. Just get a spot to get people together. So what we did on the coaching with the dojos is we would bring teams into the dojo and we would work with them for about 6 weeks, okay? 6 to 12 weeks. And we would do everything from product management, agile, DevOps. When you say DevOps, you're talking about your tool chains, helping with the tool chains, helping them understand their branching strategies and the single piece flow. Everything that you started hearing about today, we would teach them. But more importantly, rather than just teaching them and preaching to them, we actually said, bring your work And we would structure 1 or 2 hour sessions and say, hey, we're going to teach you about this concept, and then we turn around and applied it. Because the principle of the dojo is that the sooner you apply the application of the learning to your actual work, the retention goes up. And we would do that over and over again. And so we started bringing teams through the hangar. And as we started bringing teams through the hangar, we started noticing some patterns. That silo that we showed you earlier, we started seeing a lot of waste. Now, in the dojo, or in the hangar, we were able to shorten down the time frame to build out a, excuse the word, DevOps pipeline, but a tool chain pipeline. We were able to build out that pipeline in 3 weeks. Now, we had a golden ticket. The CIO had said, hey, you guys are top priority. So we went to the front of every single one of those queues. But it was very common for teams to take 6 months to get those pipelines in place. But it would take us, out of a 6 weeks, it would take us up to 3 weeks just to get that pipeline in place. And we started realizing, like, every single team at American Airlines is experiencing that same waste. We can improve this, and we can lift up the whole company. So what we did is we said, you know what, let's go work with our CI/CD pipeline team. Let's go help them out, and that way by helping them out, we help the whole company. So we started looking at central services. So we did. So when we started working with them, oh, I love it. Give me just a minute.
Yeah, that is the point I want to make too, though, Ben, like while you're working on that. When my team was like able to have the success that they had during that time period, we had, for all of the doors that we wanted to break down, we also had to have like the executive level person. So at that time it was Stephen Lice who would like eventually escalate to him. And it's like, go tell that team that I need them to say yes. And he had to do that almost every day, where it was like that. And that's one of the reasons why like it just wasn't going to scale. It's like, I don't have enough Stevens.
Yep. All right, so when we went to the CI/CD pipeline team, first thing that we did, so we took the principle of lean management right out of the book. You'll probably you heard the term value stream mapping or lean principles earlier. You talked about going and seeing all the waste in the system. Earlier it was mentioned about in the Toyota Kata, you could actually see the waste by going to a production line and looking at the system and the workflow. Okay, you can see it, you can see where it piles up. In a software delivery, we also heard today that that doesn't happen that way. It's invisible, it's digitized, everything's in there. So what do we do to be able to see that? It's what we call as value stream mapping. Karen Martin wrote an excellent book about that, about value stream mapping. What we did is we did just that. We went and did a Gemba walk. We went and we brought the people that was involved in the value stream, and it's important to note that a value stream is we took the customer's point of view, the developer, when they wanted to create their repo, all the way to when they wanted their application running in production, and we brought all the touch points, everybody that would have to talk to those in. And we had a session, a 3-day session, and we walked through this. So what you're seeing here is the result of that Gemba walk. Okay, so after 3 days, you end up with, or after the first day, you end up with a system that says, hey, I can now visually see how the flow of work goes through that system, and you can see where the weights are. So what you see at the top is every one of those blue sticky notes is a tool that the team would interact with. So you can see all of that along there. And I even cropped the value stream map. There's a lot more. In the middle, you see all of the processes and steps. The lines is all the interactions, the back and forth. And you can see how much teams and how much waste was going back and forth. And it's a really interesting thing that starts happening here. We're really good at optimizing people's time. We're the managers. I'm a manager myself, and I've fought this time and time again. But we're really good at making sure a person is busy no matter what. So what happens here is you got a person that's in one of those tasks and it's waiting for somebody else. So they submitted a ticket and they're waiting for somebody else. What do they do while they're waiting? They go spin up another task. So now they're busy doing something. I'm productive. And then this guy they're waiting for is like, oh, I'm done. I got a question for you. Well, wait a minute. Let me finish my task and I'll get back to you. So we start creating this waste. And we do this to ourselves. And we saw this. And so when we went through and we saw the bottleneck, we're like, we know what we can do. we can actually take this process and make it to where we can build this, this pipeline to where we can make it to where it's this code and make it easier for people to use and make it easier for people to onboard. Make it easier for people to do, make it the developer experience in utilizing these tools better. So when we talk about platform engineering, the first thing that we talk about at American Airlines is being able to see from your customer perspective, in this case the developer, the whole value stream and where the waste is, and then alleviate, as we saw earlier, alleviate that bottleneck to make it so the whole value stream flows faster. We did just that, okay? So what we did is we got to work. We started creating a pipeline that would allow us to be able to have developers could put a YAML file into their repos. It would scan those repos, and then it would look for that pipeline file. And if it was present, then it would spin up and create a copy of our templated pipeline, and it would create a copy for them, and they would be able to use it. And we had some really good success. Our coaching team was able to reduce that time from getting the CI/CD pipelines in place from 3 weeks down to under a week, easily. A lot of other teams were able to use this success, and we had a tremendous amount of success with this and a lot of adoption. But with every success story comes some hurdles. So we had some learnings from this. So as I mentioned, we had a lot of pipelines, okay? Now that's not a bad thing. We want the adoption. But what happened was the pipelines that we had is they were a copy of the template we had. So we would continue to make updates to this template, but it was never inherited in all those copies. So we had hundreds of pipelines we had to try and make the changes to. But that wasn't good enough. Not alone did we have to make the changes, we had to go to the team and convince them that it was a priority to make the change, and then prioritize it in their backlog and try and make the change. My gosh, talk about demoralizing. And then you got the engineers. Pretty soon, what ended up happening is now we're always knocking on their door, trying to get the change, and the only thing that's happening is the engineers are spending time making changes on CI/CD pipelines, which isn't helping them deliver code any faster, okay? And we also had teams like Tim here. They would go create their own framework and just do their own thing.
Yeah, so this was happening in parallel when my team was doing its things. And like Ben's team came to mind and they're like, we want you to use this. And I'm like, mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I can see where this is going, so we built our own, which was amazing at the time. It was absolutely amazing. We got to do a bunch of things that nobody else in the company was really doing. It was an absolutely terrible idea in retrospective. Like looking back at it, like we built something that we probably spent a few thousand hours on that got used for a year and then thrown away.
Yeah. On top of that, there was another element that we started that we didn't adhere to that we learned after in retrospect. All of our functionality went into the same pipeline. Every pipeline had the same functionality, and so we ended up with a very brittle and very tightly coupled pipeline to where we were breaking everything. And it was hard to make changes, so the innovation was hard. And then this pipeline didn't do much for your compute orchestration, your network orchestration, so there's other aspects of the developer experience that wasn't involved. So we were learning from that. So from that, we learned some core engineering principles that we would like to share with you. So first up, modularize your software delivery functions. What does that mean? So what we learned in that last slide, what we learned is that there is always going to be teams in any large enterprise that has a unique ask, okay? But there are a lion's share of the functionality that exists across the whole of the enterprise that everybody has to use. Find the functionality that everybody has to use and modularize that. So that way you can get a high amount of reuse. The elements to where people are unique, leave that to teams to allow them to extend upon the modularity. So you want to be able to, the core engineering principle that we're going for here is we wanted to get as much reuse without having to build snowflakes. And we also wanted to make it easier for people to adopt and use without having to say, well, that doesn't work for me. Okay, so that's what we were going here for in the modularity that we learned from that, from our experience. That leads into the second principle, inner source. So inner source is basically taking open source principles and bringing it inside of your company. You cannot, and the key element of inner source is other people not only just using your modules, but when it doesn't work for them going to a repo and being able to say, hey, I can make this better, and they contribute back. Now that takes a whole different mindset, and sometimes in some companies that's a whole different culture. I'm not saying that we fixed this, but there is a company, we hear this all the time, it's like, well, that doesn't work here. It doesn't work in this department. And we always challenge them and say, hey, try it. Try and work through this. But as we continue to foster the inner source, then what happens is now code that is contributed back to that core functionality, other people get to benefit. And you stop all of the snowflakes, and you stop all of those unique ideas, and then you can actually get to where you have a lot more people who are benefiting from each other. We've got a phrase on our team that we absolutely love when teams are like, hey, I'd like this, or I would like that, or it'd be cool if you did this. And we always say, we accept pull requests. So our repos are open, and we accept pull requests. So that's the mentality that we bring into American Airlines is saying, look, let's make it open, let's contribute back, and we accept pull requests.
And I'll pair with you to get that pull request in.
Yeah, and we're responsive. We jump on those and reviewing those pull requests. Change is inevitable. Change happens. Tools come and go. And in fact, actually, I would argue to say if you're not changing, you're falling behind. Technology today advances so fast that if you're not keeping up, you're going to fall behind, and you're probably missing out on something. We wanted to reduce the cost of change to our engineering teams. What we learned is when we had to go change all of those pipelines hundreds of different times, it was really hard to convince people and to get them to be able to make those changes. We did everything or doing everything that we can to extrapolate that change away from the engineers. Now you can't do everything, but where we can, extrapolate the change of tools and different things from the engineers, so that way if another tool comes along, we can leverage that. We can stick to open source. It is our choice to be able to do so, and the engineers don't have to be yanked around all the time and every time that there's a new change out there. That is demoralizing. I can't tell you how many times that my team and other team members, we've talked to people, and it's like they're so afraid of another tool is because it's going to mean so much more work that they've got all this other business work they've got to get to. So reducing the cost of change is a huge one for us. And the last one is continuing to focus on the whole developer experience. As I mentioned to you earlier, when you focus on that whole developer experience, what ends up happening is you're now able to find the bottleneck, because the bottleneck is the slowest point in the system that is keeping you from going faster. When you improve that bottleneck, your whole system gets faster. But inevitably, you're going to find another bottleneck. So keep focused on that whole value stream and looking end to end from there. So with that, Tim is going to talk to us about how we bring that all together in our current system.
If I may.
Down is the...
You got it. Okay, so bringing it all together. So let's talk about our platform team actually being formalized. So this actually happened around the time of COVID, is where we started our journey with Backstage. All of our teams were sent home. We had a number of software development teams that canceled their hangar engagements. So the coaches are now able to focus on more things. This started in our coaching organization. So we've got folks that are in there that are okay, what can I do to make this better and easier and make it easier to disseminate out to the teams? So that started our experimentation with Backstage. We were actually started in their early alpha version. We were one of the first 10 adopters of the overall platform. So we started pretty early. So that first team that we started with, we have a program that we call Adept, which are fairly new people to the company, so usually first or second year into the company. We signed a few of those people, plus our coaches, brought in an amazing network engineer who is in the audience today, Carl, who kind of just started pouring into this team. So we brought that together. We've got a number of people. We had lots of growing pains, and we'll get to that in a moment. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So we brought the team together. And then about a year later, maybe a little bit less, we did a bit of a restructuring within our organization. We took a number of the platform engineers or like platform people from other places that had worked on other things, but weren't quite developers and assigned them to the team. So we had this core of developers, we had help from our coaches, and that's kind of like how we all got started. Within the Backstage platform, like our goal was like, let's take these things that are like bottlenecks across the company and try to make them better. And Backstage was our key to getting after that. Now, obviously, like I said, we had some growing pains. With the early adoption of Backstage, there were tons and tons of breaking changes. There were so many breaking changes that the team at one point actually considered completely abandoning it. They're like, this is just too much, it's much too hard. It's not actually doing what we thought it was going to do. Separate from that, like there's lots of snowflakes. It's like we want to build patterns that help people, but we don't have a whole lot of standards. So like where we had started with the centralized architecture, back in 2017, as a kind of like a pendulum swing or like a reeling against it, we had gone the exact opposite direction and gone to full autonomy. Teams got to make every decision. Like you want to deploy in IBM Cloud, you want to use EKS, you want to use AKS, you want to use app services. The answer was always yes. You can do it, it's your choice, it's all up to you. Which meant that we had snowflakes everywhere. It was incredibly difficult for us to create patterns where a whole bunch of people were going to be like, hey, I like that. That matches what I'm doing. I want to do it. We also had troubles with like versioning and upgrade patterns and things like that. So like we'd create a software template, somebody would pull it in, and they would have that code forever. I'm sure there are still people that are running on a software template that we wrote 2.5 years ago, and they haven't pulled in any of the new goodness since we wrote it. And then like going on to that, like when it came to like our adoption curve, we're like, okay, like how do we get people to do the right things? And we ended up kind of like being dispersed across the place. And then those teams, like I said, like they just didn't quite have trust in us as Ben had talked about. So once we got the platform up and running, like things were actually going well about a year in. I want to talk a little bit about OKRs, and we'll get more into that in a moment. At about a year in, we had roughly 2,000 people using the platform. We had a few dozen software templates that we were pretty proud of. We had inner source contributors at the time. I think we were around 60 or 70 people had been contributing code back to the platform, so actually a pretty big number, and one of the highest inner source projects within American Airlines. And at that point, like since we'd seen some success, we wanted to start giving back. So we did commit to open source. One of the big things is like you saw during James's talk, like he had Roadie up there as like a competitor to Backstage. Well, what Roadie does is they actually offer Backstage as a service. One of their components that we use heavily is Argo CD, an Argo CD component within Backstage. They had a front end, but they didn't have a back end. So our team wrote the entire back end for Argo CD, and then we gave it away. We open sourced it under Roadie, and they're the primary maintainers for it, although my guess is like American Airlines still contributes probably 90% of the code. We've shared and learned with hundreds of companies. This is something that like my team is like very, very proud of and like very willing to do. We give demos weekly. Like it's pretty regular that we give demos, sometimes twice a week, between myself, Carl, Ben. If you are interested in seeing like how our platform works, send me an email. I will give you a demo, like personally give you a demo. I will dedicate an hour of my time to you so you can learn from us. We're definitely willing to do that.
On that note too, on Roadie too, is for those going to KubeCon, we'll be presenting there about some of the stuff along with Argo CD and some of the stuff that we've done with them.
Very good point. All right, so product management principles. Let's bring this to like the product and like how we actually decide what to work on, and like when to work on it and things like that. So how many of you have had this? Like something new comes out at your company and leadership comes to you and says, we're no longer using New Relic, you're going to Dynatrace. This is the law, this is the mandate, you must do it. Anybody? Yeah, it happens to us all. With this platform, since we'd seen so much success early on from the few teams that had been using it, the CIO came to me 2 years ago, like right after I had joined the team. They're like, this Kubernetes platform that you guys have built into Runway is amazing. Everyone should be using it. I'm going to make that a goal and an objective for next year. And I'm like, whoa, 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 we're not ready for that. We're not ready for that. The primary reason for that is like mandates make for like sloppy products. Like there's three ways to get adoptions. Like when it comes to a product that you're trying to bring, whether it's like internally or externally. The first one is luck. Sometimes it just works out, like you're in the right place at the right time, and you got lucky. The second one is mandates. You can just, inside of a company, you can just tell people to do it, and they have to do it. They don't have a choice. If they don't do it, you fire them. But like really, when it comes to a mandate, it robs you of learning. Like it robs you of learning from your customers and like learning about your product. And that's actually the third way that you get adoption, is through learning. You learn from your customers, you learn from trial and error, you learn through experimentation. It's like, okay, how do I do that? It's like, you want me to learn? How do I do that? OKRs are a good start. You want to determine what's important, measure it, and then focus on it. It's like, okay, well, how do I determine what's important? For Ben and I, like when we started looking at this platform, it's like, okay, we know it's important, like developer wait times, like these bottlenecks are important. We'll start there. So we'll start looking at some of these things. It's like, how long does it take to get a pipeline? How long does it take to get infrastructure stood up? How long does it take to do X, Y, Z? And then let's see how many people are actually using it. So those are the two metrics we started with. Like, how much time are we saving? And how many people are actually using it? So our first templates that we created were software templates that had something like fast API and a CI pipeline, so that you could get up and running right away, and then seeing how many people were going to use it. We then started creating lots of different plugins throughout the application. So things like if you need access to production for a short time, you do that through Runway. Need to create a new resource group in Azure, do that through Runway. Need to reset your Linux VM, do that in Runway. So we just started like bringing all of these things in that used to be tickets and made them into Runway. So it was great. Like we quickly hit our objectives. It's like, all right, I'm saving people time, and I've got lots of people using it. By the time, like this time last year, we had 3,000 people using it, as we had talked about. But when we looked at our overall company objectives, we weren't actually moving the needle like we thought we were. So we measure our teams onto our metrics across the company, so we see how often they're deploying and things like that. And we can see that like we've had about a 20% increase year over year, but we've still got teams that take months to deploy. It's still normal across American Airlines for teams to take a really long time to get deployments out the door. So it's like, okay, we need to reevaluate it. We need to figure out like what is actually correct. So it's like, okay, site visits aren't enough. Like, yes, we've got 3,000 people looking, but are they actually doing anything? So we shifted our metrics tracking to actually be based off of receiving value and more of like completing an action within Runway. And we found that the numbers are actually quite stark. Of the 3,000 like people that come to Runway, only about 300 of them actually get value out of using it. So people are coming and looking for something, like they want to use the platform, but they're not getting what they need, and they're leaving. So those like abandonment type metrics are actually quite important. So it's like, okay, let's shift to like other metrics. So we're looking at our completion metrics, and we also have started bringing in metrics around like the overall company. Like how long does it take you to get things done? And are people actually using those features in our application? Not just the other features that are mostly vanity. And that brings us to like market adoption. So if you guys are familiar with this book, it's a great book, Crossing the Chasm. Highly recommend you read it. We had gotten like through the entire adoption curve the first time through to where we were in our late majority, like everybody was using the application for something. And then we're like, okay, let's start looking at it again. When we went back to our numbers and we looked at it again, we're actually at the very first part of the red here, of our early adopters. So when we look at people who have used our shared Kubernetes platform and are in production, it's about 50 teams. And that that's about 125, 200 people. And we've got 3,000 people using the platform. And that's actually where we want people to go, because we're able to drive standards through that Kubernetes platform. We build automation into the platform. We build automation into the CI/CD pipeline. We build automation into the templates. So that's now where we're looking. And our goal is to cross that chasm, hopefully in the next year, and start getting adoption. So it's like, okay, great, how do I do that? How do I do that? So earlier this year, we actually took a portion of our headcount and we said, we need a dedicated UX engineer. We need an actual expert in it. Because one of the most common pieces of feedback that we would get from people is it's like, okay, you guys have this, where? You start looking at Runway and it's like the left menu is like 30 links. You click on a link, each of those has 20 or 30 links. It's like, how the heck do you do this in your platform? So we brought in a UX expert to help us start doing things. And I'm gonna butcher a little bit about how they work. Like, if you have questions, ask Alex, she's here in the audience, she can help you. But we do things like click tests. This is one of the most humbling experiences of my career. We wanted to build a feature and I'm like, it should go right there. Why should it go there? Because that's where the rest of the functionality is. A couple of people on my team argued, and I'm like, all right, fine, give it to Alex. She'll go do the test, and she'll let us know that it's where I said. She comes back 2 weeks later. She's done a click test. Not a single person clicked on the spot I said. Actually, let me rephrase. One person did. That was me when I did the click test. So one of the most humbling experiences in my career. So like, bring in UX experts, ask them for help. They can bring amazing things to your product. So definitely recommend that. All right, and
is it doing it to you? Oh, there
I got it. Okay. So let's go back to here we are. This is the slide that Ben had started out with. Again, dozens of certified templates. They've gone through hundreds of revisions. We have 40,000 plus site visits a month, 125 contributors. It's actually a little bit higher than that because there are people that are able to contribute to our platform without actually writing code on the platform through like external dependencies that we bring in. But like, we're pretty proud of where we've gotten. We'd love to show it off with you. We'd love to like just talk to people about what platform engineering can do for you and what these developer portals can do for like your people in your company and like how much happier it can make them. So where's our future, Ben? What do you think?
Our future's bright. So some of the focuses that we've got on our future is, so we're continuing to adopt the certified templates, as Tim was talking about. You also remember back on the slide where we were talking about the adoption curve. Each of those segments take a different strategy from a product standpoint. So we're leaning in, currently internally, we're leaning into the people that are raising their hands. We've got teams that are like, we believe in your platform. We want to use it. We know there's some features missing. We run to those guys. We bring them in close and we say, let us help you help us. We want to learn what is working and what isn't, and then we want to develop that for you and with you. So we're leaning into continuing that adoption. We're also leaning into, there's an exciting space that we're starting to dive into, which is secure software supply chain governance. Essentially, it's your CI/CD and proving that you're doing what you're doing. So the government is really pushing the airline industry in a zero trust type conversations. TSA is starting to get involved with a lot of different things. We're looking to start and build into in our pipelines where we're building in governance. So that's some space that we're just starting to play in, and we're starting to look and say, hey, how do you do this? That's nascent, and that's just now starting to come up in the industry. As we started looking at open source, it's like, okay, it's starting. So we're starting to play in that space too.
Yeah, and on that point, if you guys want to look it up, this is a framework that was recently open sourced by Microsoft. Google, like the easiest way to look it up is S2C2F. So it's the Secure Software Consumption, oh, I forgot one of them. It's supply chain, I don't know, something like that, S2C2F. Essentially, it goes through like how you build out a secure pipeline where you're able to guarantee like artifacts are the actual artifacts that were built. And you're able to do it for like automated governance and things like that. It's one of the most exciting things that I think we're working on today. We're implementing like our own SIG store. You're able to like attest that certain things occurred. So it's like, hey, did they do a security scan against this artifact that they are deploying into production? And then later on, I'll be able to say, hey, you can't deploy this thing because you didn't scan it. It'll all be automated and all be easy behind the scenes. And then my teams are also responsible for providing the enablement that makes those scans possible. So like first we build the enablement, we make it super easy for teams, and then at some point in the future we add in the requirement that they actually have to use it, but in such a way that like through the principles that we followed, it's not a burden to them. Because we don't want to be the team that's just like stealing hours from all of our software development teams. We want to make it as easy as possible.
So as you can see, Tim and I are passionate about this, and we've gone over time, so we'll be running real quick on this. But Tim, what is our future in our community?
Okay, so when it comes to our community, like we're looking to build a community across DFW. Please contact us. And do we have another slide with contact us again? I'm going to bring it up. Okay.
There we go.
So please connect with us. We've got us on here on LinkedIn. Our emails are super easy at work. It's our first name, our last name. For me, it's timothy.haagenson@aa.com, ben.burbank@aa.com. We would love to hear from you about anything when it comes to developer experience, Backstage, secure pipelines, anything like that. We're all in and super interested.
So thank you all. And I don't know if I got people, questions? No, yes? Are we out of time? All right, I don't know. All right, question up front.
I love that question. Actually, I do mandate learning on my team. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So for my team, like the teams that I'm currently the product owner for, I do not accept work from them on Fridays. They're to spend that time on learning, and typically we push learning to them of things that we expect them to learn. So I'm a big fan of that. We don't do it across all of American Airlines, but it is something that I'm very passionate about.
All right, so I got a question in front of the camera there, and then one over here.
How do you get started with Backstage?
Yeah, so the question is with smaller organizations, any recommendations on getting started with Backstage?
Right.
Tim, do you want to jump on that? Or?
I don't know that I have great recommendations. I mean, Backstage is pretty simple. Like under the hood, it's pretty simple. It's a very extensible framework. The software templates are very easy. If you're a small company, I would focus on two things. First, the catalog. Work on getting like a catalog of your items, especially if you have something like GitHub where you can like pre-parse them or use some type of preprocessor. And then second, software templates. Focus on those two first because those are relatively easy even for non-developers. And then once you start finding things where you're like, hey, this process is really hard, you can start looking into the plugins, but the plugins do require more work because it is like custom React code, custom Node.js backends, and things like that.
And if to add on to what Tim was saying is to help narrow that focus, is I would take a particular spot in the value stream you're trying to manage. Not all of it, because you could get overwhelmed trying to boil the ocean and all the software templates and all of that, and just say, hey, I want to get a Node.js template that allows me to do this to end-to-end, and just focus on that, improving that value first. Because otherwise you'll get overwhelmed with trying to boil everything and you won't get any value out quick. All right.
Yeah, hey, yeah, thanks for the great presentation. I also have the same mission, so probably we'll get connected. So quickly, on the organization change that comes with the platform engineering. Can you elaborate a little bit about that, one thing? And the other thing, how did you do the prioritization of new features into your platform?
So your first question was related to the organization change on the adoption curve?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second was on the prioritization?
Yes, prioritization of features on your platform.
Do you want to take the prioritization on the?
You want me to take that first?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so when it comes to prioritization, there are a number of like high-level objectives that I'm looking for. Right now, it's primarily around adoption of our shared Kubernetes platform. So I'm mostly building features that either make that easier or like lately redesigning like the onboarding experience because it's really bad right now. Our designer came up with like user-tested designs that are really good, so we're in the process of like prototyping and building that out. But like when it comes to like the overall prioritization, like if I was going to go to a different company, it goes back to a lot of like what Ben was talking about. It's like, where are your problems right now? Like, what are your objectives? So like we've shifted from just like developer-centric metrics, and now we're looking at strategic metrics. It's like, where do we want to shift the company like as a strategy? And that, but like I wouldn't start there. I would first start on your developers and like making their lives better.
And then on the adoption change, there's a number of books written on this, but that curve that we showed you, I think Ryan Moore is the book, Crossing the Chasm. And in the product management, they're also in the product management space, that each one of those areas, you have different strategies on how you address it. The short version is that you look for people that are eager and willing to learn with you as you're starting out, because you're going to be able to experiment and learn. And then as you start getting more adoption, you're looking for people that are like, yeah, I'm excited, but I'm waiting to see. Those are going to be your people that come second, and all the way to the people that's like, I'm never going to use your platform. And eventually you're like, well, everybody else is, I might as well use it.
Yeah, from more like Crossing the Chasm is very good. He also has another very good book, Zone Management. Like you can figure out like where you are, like which zone your application currently belongs to, and that'll give you a lot of tips on like how to manage the product for that zone.
Yep. A lot of people make a mistake if you build it, and then they said, okay, the people that said they're holdouts, they're like, oh, they're the ones that's first. I'm like, no. You're learning, and you need someone that's going to learn with you and be forgiving and be able to work with you. It makes it hard. Well, thank you. We appreciate your time, and thanks for being here, and excellent conference. So thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.